Well, good afternoon and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every Friday, and Friday rolls around again. The priest the other day was talking about time. You know, I did this reading at my mum's funeral, for every season. Turn, 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 you know the one. And the priest picked up on it and talked about Chronos time. And, you know, how some things seem to last forever and others seem to go so quickly. And to me, it's Fridays. They always seem to roll around and almost take me unaware, come up behind me real fast. And I always say to people, you know, life gets in the way. This is an old saying, the best laid plans of mice and men, you know. We have these ideas about how we think life is going to go and what we would like to do. And this is the ideal world, the dream world that never happens. Instead, certain things happen, and sometimes they're unavoidable, like an avalanche coming down a mountain. And this was, you know, this was the end of my mum's life, the funeral that we went to, and I was standing next door to this young fella, Kieran. He's 17 now, I think. And I saw the look of confusion on his face, because my dear old mum was an Irish Catholic, so we went through that whole thing, the hoolie, the church, and, you know, I was saying to Michael earlier, it was like this, I think it's Pink Floyd wrote, hear the tolling of the iron bell that calls the faithful to their knees to hear the sacred spoken magic spell. And there was that mysticism about it, almost like a spell being chanted, and I saw this look of confusion on this young fella's face, and I smiled, and I leaned over and whispered to him, "This must all seem very strange to you," and he just nodded yes. And we discussed it at some length afterwards, and it's very interesting to get the perspective from a teenager who has never grown up in a Roman Catholic Irish household and has lived a very different world, and to them it seems so strange and dislocated from their reality. And to me, it's a passing, not just of a person, but a period in my life to allow something to finish and be over. Now, when people die, you always reflect. I mean, grief, it's a natural thing, and this is my point today, and how this relates to mental health, is that when you lose somebody, and it doesn't matter whether they die or it's the breakup of a long-term relationship, and maybe you lose contact with your kids or something, that is just as grief-ridden. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed and beat yourself up with the ramifications of your actions. I wish I had done that, I could have done that. But the funny old thing, and the thing you've got to remember about the past, is with all the will in the world, all the money and ability that you might ever have, you cannot change one single second of the past. So the only way to keep yourself mentally fit and well and happy and healthy is learn to let go. And that is the hardest thing. If you just beat yourself up with the mistakes that you've made and the things you wish you had have done, it serves no purpose whatsoever other than to harm yourself. And if, like me, you have an obsessive personality, you will go over and over and over, and all you will hear is why, and it echoes in your head until you're dizzy. But the whole thing about getting over the loss of loved ones, the loss of friends, the loss of whatever, is to realise that time is a healer, that the pain will become less prominent in your mind and less painful in your heart if you give yourself a little bit of time. One of the psychiatrists that I was lucky enough to meet, Aruna Patel, taught me to take it easy, to be gentler with myself and not beat myself up so obsessively, but also to be mindful. And what I find often is shared grief can be quite therapeutic without obsessing and dwelling, but verbalising something to someone else who is in a similar situation can often be conducive for each person's good, in as much as you can bounce off that remorse, that regret, that pang, and they'll bounce it back at you when you realise, okay, well, if nothing else, I'm not alone in this. And we're all individuals. Everybody handles everything differently. But all of us can benefit from realising that you have to, at some point, if you cannot forgive yourself your past mistakes, then at least for your own good, get over it. Get over it. Let it go. Cut it away and let it sink away from you. And what I do is I try to remember something happy, something funny. I did my little piece and I talked about when I was about 3 years old, I was in the lounge and I heard this almighty scream, this blood-curdling, spine-freezing, high-pitched scream of my mother. And I thought something absolutely tragic had happened. I went flying in there, about 3.5. And there's my mother, a big buxom lass, on the top of this little wooden stool, dancing up and down, squealing. There's a mouse, there's a mouse, there's a mouse, Mark, there's a mouse, there's a mouse. And our old cat Ginger had brought in a prize, as she often did, live, of course. And poor little old me had to grab the frying pan and chase this poor panicking little grey speck of nothing round the kitchen, going bang, 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 and every time the fry pan came down, the little mouse would leap for his life, and my mother would squeal even more, spinning in a circle and dancing on this tiny little wooden stool, squealing as I ran after this thing and bashed it. That was the first time that happened, and there were many other times afterwards, but when I think of Mum, that's how I will always remember her. And like I said to them at the time, I don't want any of you to remember the end of any of our days. I want you to remember us at our best. And that to me is how I've managed to get over the grief of many, many friends, family, etc. that I've lost over the years, is always try and picture an image in your mind of them that makes you smile. And that goes a long, long way to helping you get over the initial pain, which at times can be absolutely overwhelming. And the other thing is, if you do need to allow yourself to be overwhelmed and have a good cry for 5 or 10 minutes, then do so. And once it's done, then put it back in the bag and go and do something good. And get your mind off it and concentrate on something else. It's often good to be busy, hobbies, anything like that can take your mind off things, focus on other things, and eventually that focus will start moving into a better area than dwelling on the past and the pain. And as I say, time does heal, friends do heal. Being busy is great. Dwelling on things serves little purpose other than to harm yourself. So I guess it's all about positive mental attitude. Finding things to smile about. And that I know is so, so hard when you are depressed and you are really badly down. It's hard to get up. But if you do, you can find that life goes on. There are still a lot of wonderful things to see and do. There are still a lot of amazing people around. And I like to think that people like my mum helped me along the way. And this is how I see her, not as someone I loved who was taken away, but somebody who empowered me with her love and maybe, just maybe, threw me onto somebody else. I hope so. Right, well, I better get cracking. The story needs to be told. This is Victoria Falls and Huangi Game Park, and for those of you who don't know my show, I talk about, I guess, very personal things. often quite confronting, provocative, and it is intentionally that way. I like to make people think about things, think about themselves, and think about the world around them. I'm the one who's always going to be poking you and saying, hey, wake up, come on, what about this? That's my job. That's, it's my job in life. It's what I do, and I love doing it. But I like to think I do it because I help people. This is my genuine drive. I think I've always had that in me, is to try and help others who I can see are going down a path that I went down that damaged me. And if I can help them avoid those mistakes, then, there's a few better things you can do for somebody else. And as I say, for those of you who don't know my show, I talk a fair bit about mental health, about my experiences, the experiences of the many, many people I've met through those unfortunate times, and that's been a real roller coaster too. I've met wonderful people, I've met terrible people, and you do tend to get all sorts at that end of the spectrum. But I also talk about my travels in Africa, my life in Europe. Even although I've always suffered from depression, I've always managed to achieve things in my life despite my fetters, and a lot of people do. A lot of amazing, wonderful people. I often talk about people like Jimi Hendrix, Winston Churchill, people I admire and love and respect, and these people suffered terribly, terribly from depression, from self-doubt and the doubt of others. And it's, while it may inhibit you to some degree, it doesn't make life impossible, nor does it make adventures impossible. You can do anything and everything you want to do if you set your mind to it, and it's a big wide world out there. The more you see of it, the more you come to love it. The more adventures you have, the richer your life becomes. And when you get like me, on in years a little bit, you can reflect upon those achievements, and I often like to talk with my friends who were with me at the time, and it's such a wonderful feeling to know that we had the balls to go out there and do some pretty outrageous, incredible things, some of which were mistakes I regret, but others, they changed me. They changed my whole life and my perspective on the world, and I like to think that they enriched me. And the story here today is one of those times. This was when we went to Victoria Falls and Huangi Game Park in Zimbabwe. This would have been around about 86, 87, somewhere around there. So a very long time ago, but, those parts of Africa don't change in a hurry, and Huangi's still there, and who knows, before I die I just may get back to those incredible places. But here's the story of the last time I was there. 4 of us, Seedy, Wayne, Dave and myself, drove west across the northern Kalahari. We had just come from Chobe National Game Park in Botswana and headed into Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe, had only been in power for a few years, and Zimbabwe, though now poor, still had signs of what a rich country it was when it was southern Rhodesia. Many years of war, however, had financially crippled the new Zimbabwe, and no improvement was in sight. This meant the tourists who did venture up had plenty to spend, and there was no shortage of accommodation. As we left Chobe, the desert started to take over again, so I drove from dawn till dark to get through to Victoria Falls. It's also named the Smoke That Thunders, and a few kilometres from the falls we could hear them and see the mist in the sky above. Victoria Falls are reputed to be the largest in the world, and they are truly a sight to behold. Even before we laid eyes on them, they oppress with that mighty thundering sound as we approach. The huge Zambezi River feeds this natural wonder, and at first it is hard to take it all in, as it is some 1,700 metres long and about 100 metres from top to bottom. The Zambezi spills over a level sheet of basalt, making the drop sharp and spectacular. It is so sharp, the falling water creates a permanent mist rising high in the air to about 400 metres. It creates a rainbow above the falls by day, and a lunar moonbow can be seen at night. The spray comes shooting upwards like inverted rain. Despite having been discovered by Livingstone as late as 1855, it has captivated tourists ever since, and we were no exceptions. We spent the best part of the first day on the more spectacular Zimbabwe side, where it is possible to get right up to the edge of the falls and see to the bottom. It was slippery and dangerous at the edge, but well worth the risk for the view. We were there in late summer, so the falls had reduced to a series of about 9 discernible falls, each one of them impressive in itself, but the series together was truly breathtaking. At the end of the falls were a load of the biggest crocodiles I have ever seen, with the falls acting like a smorgasbord for these massive beasts. The next day, we crossed up to Zambia via Victoria Falls Bridge, which allows a unique view up the falls. Zambia was in worse financial state than Zimbabwe, and black market money traders haggled openly for hard currency right outside the border guard's building. We left the car at the border and took a taxi to the nearest town to get on the gin and tonics. We then returned to one of the safari lodges, where we had a fine meal on the riverfront as we watched the burning red sun slowly sink down. Unfortunately, we drank too much and got stuck in Zambia when we missed the border closing. We were forced to sleep in the open despite the warning signs of roaming lions. We ended up instead being eaten alive by mosquitoes, but relieved the next morning. We spent a few days in Victoria Falls, viewing them from every way possible, spellbound by the great length and volume of these massive falls. The weather was very hot and lent itself to drinking and wandering along the falls. Altogether too soon, it was time to leave Victoria Falls and head south to Huangi National Game Park. Huangi is dotted with natural waterholes called pans. Some are fed by natural springs and some by 2 large lakes in the north of the park. We were immediately impressed by the infrastructure of the park. We headed to the northern section and booked into Cinnamantella Camp. The camp was a fenced compound on the top of a hill with great views. It also had a small shop run by a local guy who we called Phil for short. He was a very happy and personable guy and sorted out a 2-bedroom hut for us, which had a fridge and even featured a hot bath. We decided to make Cinnamantella our base camp and concentrate our game spotting to the northern section of the park. At the nearest waterholes, we were met with another luxury, viewing platforms. These platforms were 1 story high with stairs leading up to a glass enclosure where it was safe to view all of the game that came down to drink. The platform also offered shade from the oppressive heat of the midday sun. The watering holes or pans were like magnets for game. Each type of game had a turn at the watering holes, so it wasn't necessary to chase the game about. Whilst at one of the viewing platforms, I met a biologist who was on holiday. He pointed out many different species of birds to me, which made for great viewing with the binoculars. It opened up another layer of life to me and emphasised just how busy the watering holes really were. Huangi boasts many hundreds of species of birds, so there was a constant change of different birds to view. The larger game, however, were truly breathtaking. By being out of sight and smell from the larger animals, they would approach without fear or inhibition. The funniest to watch were the giraffes, which had great difficulty getting their long necks down to drink. They would buckle their knees inwards and lower their long necks, leaving them in a very vulnerable position. They will only drink when they are sure there are no lions on the prowl, usually in the heat of the day. On our first day at Huangi, we were treated by a smorgasbord of different game at the waterhole, from giraffe in the middle of the day to various antelope in the afternoon, to elephants in the early evening to sunset. Each species seemed to have a certain time of day they preferred to drink, so it was unnecessary to move from our superb viewing platform. They also seemed to have different personalities, with some like gazelles always tense and nervous, while the likes of the elephants were very relaxed and came to bathe and play. At the end of the first superb day of game spotting, we returned to Cinnamantella Camp for dinner and the luxury of a hot bath. The camp being on a hill meant great viewing across the surrounding countryside, so we had great game spotting until sunset. The next day we got up early to make the most of the change of light when predators are on the prowl. Despite the early rise, we did not see a kill, as these are few and far between. Instead, we spent a great day at the viewing platforms where we were treated to some amazing sights. At one stage we saw some beautiful kudu come down to drink. First the large males, with their beautiful corkscrew horns, came down and checked out the water for crocodiles, stamping and then sipping cautiously. These beautiful antelope then formed up like sentinels, making a corridor for the females and young to walk down. The males stood guard, facing outwards, while the females and young took a drink. When they finished, they melted away, slow and orderly, like a military exercise. It was amazing to see the degree of caution and cooperation the kudu showed, something no zoo could ever show you. Every species seemed to have instinctive and sophisticated survival behaviour, which was amazing to witness. During the afternoon, on the second day, we heard a strange tapping sound on the hubcaps of the car. We came down from the viewing platform to find the strangest looking birds tapping away at our tyre valves. Called hornbills, these medium-sized clowns, a little smaller than a chicken, had large bills like macaws. They showed no fear of us, and happily pecked away until we grabbed them by the bill and moved them away. Undeterred, they came back for more, until they tired of our little game, and we left them to peck away until they lost interest. The confidence of one animal seemed to flow on to others, and it was amazing to see so many different animals drinking with such a relaxed attitude. The huge numbers of animals the waterholes attracted were quite staggering, and it was a real privilege to experience game spotting at its best. On our return to camp each night, we were spoiled to a hot bath by Phil, the store manager, who lit the fire to heat the drum of water. On a whim, we asked Phil if he could get us a couple of dozen beers. Ever helpful, he advised he would have some for us by the end of the next day. Unbeknown to us, he got his younger brother to cycle some 20 kilometres to the nearest safari lodge down rough old roads to pick some up for us. When we found this out, we paid the helpful lad $10 for his troubles, and he thought Christmas had come. As our stores got low, we tried some of the antelope Phil had hanging in the cool store and made ourselves sick on the unusually gamey meat. After that, we were a little bit more cautious with the exotic foods available. On the third day, we arrived back at camp just on sunset, and Phil was jumping around our lodge in an excited state. I parked up and jumped out as Phil shouted and pointed. With my binoculars handy and our high vantage point, I quickly picked up the lion he was pointing out. Down on the plain, a single lion was hunting a warthog. Slowly it crept up through the grass on its prey, using the long grass to disguise it. Once within striking distance, it broke cover and sprinted towards the unsuspecting hog. As soon as the hog spotted the lion, it squealed and sprinted off, but to no avail. The lion swiped the hog across the shoulder and sent it spiralling across the ground. With one quick leap, it was upon the hog, grabbing it by the throat, quickly choking the life out of its poor victim. A great amount of dust was kicked up by the scuffle that ensued, and I lost sight of the pair. After a tense minute or so, the lion appeared, dragging the hog by the throat. The entire kill took only a few minutes. It was a case of right place, right time. It was so captivating that those few minutes felt like an hour. With so much game around, the lions looked in splendid condition. They were massive animals which were difficult to spot as they used the long grass to camouflage themselves. By staying still, their colour blends in absolutely perfectly. To see a kill from the high vantage point of the camp made the whole thing perfect. Although there were huge amounts of game about, they seemed much better catered for by the systems of watering holes around. And thanks to these watering holes, the game get precious water in the height of summer when it was needed most. But it was obvious the game park was well past its heyday when southern Rhodesia was rich. Even in the early years of Mugabe's reign, Zimbabwe struggled. Poverty in the country was rampant and farmers were being driven off their land only to see it fall into rack and ruin. Their currency was not recognised in other banks and inflation was running completely out of control. The future for parks like Huangi National seemed tenuous at best. Unfortunately, civil war was rampant in southern Africa, with Angola and Mozambique at war and South Africa seemingly on the brink. The game parks rely on tourist dollars, and war frightens them off for many years. Special places like Huangi National Game Park would never be able to reach the glory days of old when hunters paid huge prices to shoot trophy animals. In stark contrast to the rampant poverty in society, countries like Zimbabwe are rich in natural minerals like copper, platinum and gold. Huge profitable mines employing tens of thousands of miners are all over southern Africa. But the region is fraught with social problems. Illiteracy is rampant, and people in their millions live in slum conditions. All the time, civil unrest boils along, simmering over now and then. In the many years since I visited the region, the ANC's Mandela government came and went in South Africa and delivered hope without solutions. They helped Zimbabwe, but unfortunately many South Africans of all races had to emigrate to Australia and New Zealand. Successive governments in countries like Zimbabwe have failed on schooling, health and employment. Zimbabwe, slowly strangled by Mugabe's rule, has suffered badly, but places like Huangi still exist as destinations for those keen for adventure. For my part, my feeling is of great contrast. I will never forget the falls and the beauty of Huangi Park. I hold out hope for these magnificent places and their beautiful country, yet I feel such sorrow for the people of Zimbabwe as they suffer. I hope someday soon democracy will help them get to a better place. I know I will never forget our adventures in the blazing sun. I leave some place of me there and take the memories of those sunsets and return. The end. It's me for another week. Gotta go. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Veronica, Wairarapa TV, all our great sponsors, and all of you who tune into this show. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly enjoy bringing it to you. I'll try and see you next week. Bye for now.